Welcome to the Silver Divorce Podcast, where we offer stories, advice, and support for people age 50 plus who are considering or who are facing divorce. I'm Lisa.
And I am Pat. Lisa, before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that we are not attorneys and we are not counselors. Lisa and I are here to share experiences and knowledge that we've gained to help you avoid the pitfalls of the divorce process. Also, while the stories we share are true, the names have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals involved.
And Pat, that I want to reiterate that because as we ask people to email us, we're not going to share your name. Oftentimes people will want to have an answer to a question, but they may not want their spouse to know. Maybe they're in divorce or they're considering divorce.
They want to be anonymous.
That's right. So you might hear us talk about Mary and Jack quite a bit and wonder,
Jack and Jill.
That couple has a lot of problems. Well, no, our stories are absolutely true, but we are changing the names to protect people's privacy.
That's right. And with that being said, what are we going to talk about today, Lisa?
Well, we're going to explore the topic of identity crisis. Many times during a marriage that was decades long, we only see ourselves as a wife or a mother or a husband or a father. And what happens when that title goes away? The feeling of lost identity is also heightened if you recently retired. I know for me, I retired and suddenly I was nobody's boss, nobody's employee. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in charge of anything. And I really felt a loss of identity with that. And then on top of it, I was divorced 17 months later. So it is as though that complete world fell apart. And I wondered, who am I? What am I going to do with my life? Well, thankfully, we have someone here who's going to help answer those questions. And I am so pleased to have Holly Holloway with us. Holly is a licensed life coach through Martha Beck Wayfinder Life Coach Training. And she has made it her calling to help other women through divorce recovery and discover how incredible their lives can be. She divorced at the age of 61 and after nearly 30 years of marriage. She does have 3 adult children. She lives in a small town in the mountains of Colorado, and she's able to hike as often as possible. She loves connecting with great ideas, and her inspiration is received through the people she interacts with and through books, both fiction and nonfiction. And she brings that wisdom that she's collected to her coaching. So welcome, Holly.
Well, hello, ladies. I'm just tickled to be with you this morning.
We're so pleased.
It's still morning for me here.
I bet.
And I did get out for a hike this morning. It was lovely.
That's wonderful.
Spring is coming, maybe.
Well, it hasn't made up its mind. It goes spring and then it goes, summer. Like here, it's 80 one day and 50 the next.
We go backwards. Winter. Yeah. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I just want to let our listeners know, in the spirit of full disclosure, I participated in Holly's program called Blossom, a woman's healing collective. And I have to tell you, I don't think I would be where I am today if I hadn't have done that. It really refocused my energy away from what happened to me to being able to create a roadmap to shape my future. So for the first time in more than a year, I'm really excited to explore what lies ahead. And that really includes this podcast. I don't think it would have been possible if I hadn't felt stronger and more confident after going through Holly's program. So taking part in Blossom has been a significant turning point for me. So thank you for that, Holly.
Loved having you in the group. It was a tremendous group of women. We just for your listeners, it's a very small group of women, 10 women, and we meet for 12 weeks and become through being very vulnerable and open. The women became very close. I mean, I would call it a sisterhood at the end. By the end,
yeah, I would agree with that absolutely. And it was interesting how you could visually see each person just open up and become more confident and more assured in the direction they were headed by the end of it. So it was very
Wasn't
inspiring.
that true?
Yeah, it was.
Like the changes that were happening inside, it was so apparent to everyone else outside. You know, their external, their appearance. It just was reflected there. It was amazing to see.
Yeah, it is absolutely worth the time that you put into the healing process, because healing will not happen on its own, and it is a fantastic way to kickstart you into the next journey ahead. So,
well, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that. I'm glad that it was so helpful for you. That is my hope.
Well, you know, we know that identity crisis is common after the breakup of a long-term marriage. You know, breakup of a long-term marriage is much like death. There's pain, there's confusion, there's grief, and you know, you're dealing at the same time with splitting up the marital property. And this happens even if you are the one to initiate the divorce. And I think it's important to know oftentimes where that identity crisis originates. So, Holly, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think it has several roots. So, you know, there is the whole fact that after, you know, we're talking about gray divorce after decades of marriage, and I've had clients who have been married 40 plus years, even closing in on 50 years of marriage.
Wow.
That is a significant chunk of your life being a part of this couple, this unit. So it can be a big shock to suddenly find that part of yourself gone. And as you pointed out, Lisa, this is often happening around the same time that people are going through retirement and losing that part of their identity. They may also be emptying the nest or have had that happen recently. So that part of the identity is being peeled away. So it can be very challenging. I also think that among people of our age, it is not uncommon to have people have gone from family homes straight or almost straight into marriage and really have had no period in their lives where it was just them.
That happened to me, yeah.
Yeah, you know, some of that exploration that it sounds like young people are doing now. They're getting married later, so they're having some time to be on their own and get a better sense of self. Many of us didn't have that. And I think it also is perhaps more common in people of our generation that we look externally, or many of us kind of look externally for our identity. In other words, you know, we are someone's wife, we are someone's mother, we are someone's daughter or sister. Our sense of self comes a lot from our interactions with other people.
Yeah.
So that can make it very challenging. And the last thing I'll say is that oftentimes, there can be this, especially if you were not the one initiating divorce, there can be a sudden, whoa, you know, I just, you know, didn't expect this, didn't see this coming. But I think oftentimes as people start to do internal work, the self-work that is required for divorce recovery, you can start to see that there was like this erosion of self, probably throughout decades of the marriage. And that's probably truer for those of us, and I'm raising my hand, who were conflict avoidant or, you know, people pleasers. I mean, of course, marriage involves a lot of compromise. We all know that. But sometimes that can be lopsided. And, you know, where we are giving away a lot more of ourselves in order to avoid conflicts, in order to keep the peace. And that also can lead to kind of this slow drip, you know, away of who am I?
Yeah, and I think also oftentimes one spouse can see there might be a pulling away a little bit. They're not as close as they were, so they try harder. And they're perhaps a people pleaser, and so they're trying harder to work that out what they don't realize is that once one spouse mentally leaves the relationship, they're left to play emotional catch up. And they also, there's this sense of pride or disbelief, like, how could he leave me behind? And that also plays into your loss of identity, because suddenly, and I see this over and over again, women will say, I guess I'm not worthy. How can I not be worthy? So that, that whole mental, I've let one spouse leaving the relationship mentally a long time ago while you're still finding out and you're trying to play catch up is huge. And I think Pat experienced that. She can talk a little bit about her experience as being the first to leave the relationship.
Yeah, that's true. I'd like to just briefly touch on that. As Lisa stated, I was the one that initiated the divorce. And also in my case, I did mentally leave the relationship, but it was a process for me. I had to prepare myself mentally and emotionally. I had been building up my courage to move forward and file for a good long while. I had been dealing with a spouse who abused both me and my daughter. He was a very manipulative and controlling person, and I know he never expected or believed I would do such a thing. So yes, I did blindside him, but it was for my own health and well-being as well as my daughter. And I did realize that I was losing my identity within the marriage.
Yeah. Pat, our stories sound so similar.
Yeah.
I, too, was the one who left the marriage. And, I think the difference is you and I were doing a whole lot of work in the years, sometimes even decades, leading up to that
Absolutely.
decision. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because women will ask, well, how long has it taken you to recover? Oh, yeah. Each person's journey is so unique, but
it is.
I do think that there's a lot of work that goes into, beforehand, trying to make things work. And then, as you're describing, getting up the courage, can I really do this?
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of thinking and praying, but I'm just so glad I did it. And my daughter and I both now are just happy and healthy.
Good. I am so glad to hear that. I understand what we're talking about here. The person who is caught off guard, who's had the rug pulled out from underneath them, will definitely struggle to make sense of what has happened. And I see this so often. Again, I deal primarily with women, so I'm going to speak from that perspective. But to me, that's a rabbit hole. Women get into this thing that I cannot move on, I cannot heal until I understand what has happened. That's never going to happen.
Right. That is correct.
It's never going to happen. You're not a mind reader. The idea of understanding someone else's beliefs, thoughts, behavior, motivation, never going to happen.
No.
And I think, that's just a distraction from the work you really need to do, which is what we're talking about today.
That's right.
And rediscovering yourself.
And that is so important to begin to think about how you're going to move forward and come off of the ruminating about the past and rehashing every single conversation of a dying marriage. So, how does one begin to start to find themselves again, Pat? Or I'm sorry, Holly.
No,
I'm looking at Pat
worries.
And talking to you. Sorry.
I wanted to say one other thing, though, about, when you are blindsided. I mean, the big thing that women are dealing with, besides thinking, ruminating about what happened, is all the emotions, and so much, can be anger, it can be grief at the same time. We can be grieving the end of something, grieving the end of something we thought was true and didn't turn out to be true. So many emotions at once, and very powerful emotions. And I know those are so hard to deal with. But the interesting thing, I think, is that our emotions are real. They are our emotions. You can't fake an emotion. The thoughts that are behind those emotions, the thoughts or beliefs that are behind those emotions, those might be planted by, someone way back in our childhood who said you're not good enough or something. But the actual emotions themselves, they are very real, and they are very us. So in some sense, that is one path to finding yourself, is accepting and allowing those emotions. And that probably should be a whole nother podcast about dealing with emotions.
Giving yourself time to feel those emotions.
And Holly, I'd like to say, I agree with all that. I know, being a facilitator in divorce care, there was one lady who was married to a doctor in our area, and she came through divorce care 3 times. She was absolutely devastated and blindsided. And the first cycle, all she could do was cry. But she did find herself with our help and everybody else's, and she's thriving today. She's doing great. But it took her that long to process through all that. Yeah.
The emotions can be, that can be in itself. It can be a lot to deal with, and there are a lot of tools that can help people to feel safe and feel, that's the most important thing, is to feel safe when you're processing those emotions.
Yes,
because it can be a very scary thing to feel like you are caught up in some really overpowering emotions.
Absolutely.
But there are definitely ways to deal with that. But so on your question, which is how to move.
Right. How do you move forward? It is one thing to be in that state of processing emotions, but how do you move out of that state? How much time or grace do you give yourself to feel that before you move out? And you may think, I'm not ready, but at some point, it's almost a deliberate act that you have to make yourself be ready. Is that something that you think is true?
I really, really believe that each one of us, this journey through this, incredibly challenging life event is deeply personal, and that in itself is yet another pathway to self, is honoring that my journey is going to be different from your journey, is going to be, different from someone else's journey. And so I'm always hesitant to put any kind of a timetable on it.
So it's okay if you feel like, I want to stay here for a few months. I'm not quite ready. That's perfectly fine, because it's your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm just going to reiterate this point that the place that I see that people get stuck is not in the emotions thing. That's going to take what it's going to take. I mean, you can't hurry that process of working through your emotions.
Everybody's grief is different.
Absolutely. And you certainly don't want to repress it either. I think the part where people get stuck is in the ruminating, the thinking part. Yeah. And that's where, you kind of have to take yourself firmly by the hand and say, this is not working. This is not moving me forward at all.
Yeah.
And it's keeping me from doing the important work I need to do, which is focusing on myself. It's interesting, Lisa, we just finished up the 12-week group that you were a part of. Did you notice how seldom in 12 weeks of meeting we talked about our ex-husband?
Right. Yeah. I have to say, that's what I expected it was going to be, was just one session after another of moaning and groaning about our exes, and we never talked about them.
They hardly came up.
I know.
It was, but that's what was so cool is, everybody was talking about, this was really a self-exploration.
Yeah.
And that's where you saw everybody blossom.
Yeah. And, Holly, I have to tell you my little strategy for rumination, because I found that too. I would replay those stories and those conversations and arguments or whatever in my head. And this might sound crazy, but you remember the old days when they would say if you were on a diet, put a rubber band around your wrist, and if you started to think that you were going to go eat something you shouldn't, you're supposed to snap your rubber band to make yourself... Well,
yes, I do.
I kind of replicated that when I would fall into those cycles of rumination. And I would mentally, not visually, I didn't actually put a rubber band around my wrist, but I would mentally snap that rubber band and say, Lisa, stop. It's not going to change anything.
That's right.
And I would force myself. I would go read the Bible, or I would go read a book by Brene Brown, or I would go down to my workshop. And, it's like a conscious effort to stop that cycle so you can begin to move on.
Yeah, stopping the habit of rumination, which is a well-developed habit for many of us. For some reason, I always picture my daughters really loved the Oregon Trail. There was like a computer game, and I always picture the deep ruts that apparently are you can still find in places in Wyoming or Nebraska. We dig these deep grooves into our brain where the slightest thing just triggers it, and we just go right back into those patterns of thought that may have their origins way, way, way back, in first grade, that Brownie leader who made some insensitive remark, and that's stuck with you all these years. And, everything around you're constantly picking up information that confirms what that person said decades ago. Mm-hmm. So rumination can be, it can be very stubborn. It just requires consistency and patience and compassion to just keep working on it. And when you notice that your mind is off on a trail of rumination, to, like you said, to just stop and say, this isn't helping me. One suggestion I have offered to women that I found to be helpful is to actually schedule a time that you're going to go ahead and do it, that you're going to actually think all those negative thoughts. Set aside 15 or 20 minutes every evening at 7 o'clock. And I always recommend, with a lot of work like this, writing it down, because there is something about processing things, not just through our brain, but also through our bodies, through the act of handwriting, even if you need to write on the computer. But set aside a time of day that you are going to get it all out. And what that means is the rest of the day, every time you find yourself going down that path, you can remind yourself, oh, nope, save that thought. I'm going to do that tonight at 7 p.m. Mm-hmm. And so that's
a good
one
idea.
Simple tool. Yeah. Another thing, like you were suggesting, Lisa, is just distract yourself. A lot of times when we start going down the rabbit hole of rumination, it feeds our emotions, of course, and you can feel that energy building up. You get, madder and madder the more you think. Get out and move, whether it's going out for a very brisk walk, which is something I did a whole lot of when I was going through divorce. People would see me out pounding the pavement, marching by double time. But, get out and move. Turn on some music and dance. Do something to move your body to help dissipate some of that.
Get your mind off of
energy.
it. Yeah.
It actually
get your mind off of it.
Creates some endorphins, that gives you a little bit of sense of pleasure when you're creating endorphins. So, also
that can help. I think you talked about getting into a studio or something. Do something you love. Mm-hmm. Yeah. See if you can get in the flow, because that will definitely get you out of your head and into whatever it is you're doing, planting your garden or, painting a watercolor or whatever it is that you love to do. There are definitely tools that you can use.
Yeah, I think too, writing it down helps with sleep. If you're doing that in the evening and you write all that down, then your the cache in your mind is cleared, and I think you actually sleep a little better, which is so important.
That's interesting,
to start.
Yeah. The other thing with writing it down, I think it helps to speed up this process, and that is the process of getting bored with it all.
Right.
I don't know if either of you ladies had
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
You just reach a point where it's just like, oh, this again? Really? This is just getting boring.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of thinking about it. I'm so
That's
tired
right.
of talking about it. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. So that can help with all of that.
Well, Holly,
But,
how can we shift this mindset away from divorce being a personal failure that defines who we are?
So failure is such an interesting thing in our culture, really. We are such a culture of winners and losers, success versus failing. So everything seems to be couched in those terms. And, again, I think that that thinking of things that way can, first of all, it can set off that confirmation bias where we are looking for things that in our world that confirm, yes, I'm a loser, yes, I'm a failure. And so what I like to encourage people to do is practice having what's called an open mindset. And I think there's debate over whether some people I think are born with an open mindset, and that's the mindset where the things that happen to you in life are just things that happen to you, things that you learn from. That's the key, is there are things that you learn from, versus people with a closed mindset view the things that happen to them as confirmation that, yes, I am an idiot. Just like that second grade teacher said, I am and will always be an idiot.
And, I hate that because, it's a victim mentality. And I know one person specifically that just stays there and has stayed there for years, and it's sad.
Yeah, it definitely is a victim mentality. I think, the main thing to do is to start thinking about when we have experiences in our life that all of life can be here to teach us things. And I want to stress can be here if we look at it the right way.
Right.
Everything that happens to us in our lifetimes is food for thought, is food for learning, is, okay, how will I do that differently next time?
Exactly.
Yeah, how will I do it differently next time? I also would think, what am I supposed to learn from this? There is a plan, and I'm very religious, so I would think, I know God has a plan for me, and that's why I'm going through this. It's how am I going to figure out what that is?
Right.
So.
Yeah. I know a lot of people say everything happens for a reason, and that can sometimes be a tricky expression, and some people have balked at that. I think everything happens for a reason if you make everything
Excellent
happen if you make everything have meaning somehow. And it doesn't have to have negative meaning. It can be, oh, I see how I always do that thing I do, and it's not helping me be the person I want to be. I want to change that going forward.
Yeah,
what
and
can I do different?
Right. And if I can share in my experience, when you're married, you're so involved working, you're taking care of your children, your husband, the home, blah, blah, blah. And I had to really talk to myself because I felt selfish thinking about myself. What do I want to do? How do I want to live the rest of my life? It almost felt selfish. Does that make sense, Holly?
Absolutely. I remember I had one client that I was talking to, and I asked her a really simple question. I said, "What do you want?"
Yeah.
And I
get it.
She broke down and sobbed.
She
said, I have no idea. No, I've never asked myself that question. Nobody has ever asked me that question. I have no idea.
We just never allowed to let ourselves think like that.
No. And I think that's a good starting place for starting to get to know yourself, is ask yourself some questions. Every day you could, write on a different journal prompt. What makes me tick? What are some patterns in my life? Patterns that work for me, patterns that don't work for me. What dreams have I let go of? What are things I love to do? What
Yeah.
are my strengths?
And those
What do
can
I
be
struggle
hard.
with?
Those can be hard questions because you've just read us. You've been involved with everything else all your life for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it can be very tricky to suddenly be, putting that lens on ourselves when
Yes.
it can feel very foreign and very selfish is a great word, Pat, because I have
Yeah.
heard that come up time and time again from women that, wow, all this, stuff about me, that feels kind of
I
selfish.
know.
And if you think about
Yeah.
it, most women have been married longer than they were single. So
Exactly.
they're not used
Yeah.
to it.
No.
Yeah.
It is foreign to them.
But the thing is, as we do this self-work, focus on ourselves, do that internal work, see where we have patterns that aren't serving us, see where we have beliefs or stories that are not serving us. As we do that work and become healthier ourselves, increase our well-being, we're modeling it for our sisters, daughters,
Absolutely.
granddaughters.
So important.
It does so much good in the world. It's that old adage about, putting out on your own oxygen mask. As we take care of ourselves, we are taking care of the people around us in the best possible way. I mean, us being totally sacrificing, totally, playing small and having our needs get swept under the rug, and that does not help the women around us in our lives or the people around us in our lives to see, oh yeah, that's how I can be my best self is.
Right. And if you have children, if you have daughters, you're providing a much better example to your daughters
Exactly,
as to
Lisa.
what they should expect out of a relationship and how they should love themselves. That's so hard for us as women
agree.
who take care of others, just to love ourselves.
Yeah, we're that model for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because love is infinite. The more the more we practice it in our own lives, the more there is to share.
And I think the more open we are about it,
the
more others are attracted to us. And I don't mean attracted in a find another husband way, but I just mean just your aura is lighter. Your aura
you're showing
is
confidence,
brighter, and suddenly good things start happening to you.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit about, you just reminded me about a point I did want to make about self-identity, and that's the idea of how we've spent, probably many of us have spent a good chunk of our lives fitting in to what someone else wanted us to be.
Right.
Or what we believed our culture wanted us to be. This is what a good mom is. This is what a good wife is. And again, there can be this uncomfortable feeling about, really, I'm going to just be myself. You really want, all that quirkiness, all the eccentricities that I keep hidden away. You really want me to show all that. And there's a great guy. His name is, I've got to remember what it is. Elisha Goldstein. He's a psychologist or who's online. He did this wonderful short video that I absolutely loved, where he talked about, think about people, the really special people in your life that you absolutely love, kids or that best friend that you've had forever. The thing that we love about that person is not, oh yeah, Sally, I loved all the ways that she dressed just like every other woman on the block, or, or she played, whatever, she did all the same things everybody else did. No, what we love about those people are the things that really stand out, that are unique about them.
Right.
I think of a college friend I have who, when she gets laughing, she starts snorting. And that is just her thing. And we love that about her. And I'm sure there was a time that she was probably embarrassed about it. Hopefully now she's embraced that that's just who she is. And I don't know why we don't give ourselves that same grace and believe that what people want to see are the things that really make us us.
That's right.
It's not all the ways that we are like everybody else.
That's right. And really, being at the age we are in gray divorce and having been through so much, now's that time.
Yeah.
Now's the time to really embrace who you really are.
Absolutely.
And so that other people can see that if there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it was interesting in the Blossom group. Another thing that I really noticed was probably the theme that kept recurring the most was, I am no longer willing to play small.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was huge.
And I'm sure how each woman was defining that was completely different from one to another. But that seemed to be, definitely an overriding sentiment of, and I guess small would be like being invisible,
mm-hmm.
being not seen or heard. That was unacceptable.
Yeah, letting other people have their way and putting yourself as second. We're no longer willing to do that or ready to do that. Now is our time. So that was an enormous step ahead for many of us in that group.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. So this has really been a fascinating conversation today.
It
Holly.
has.
Yeah, we would like.
I've enjoyed it, ladies.
Yeah,
Me too. So
would you tell us, our listeners about your social media presence and your website and how we can reach you, Holly?
Absolutely. I've got a lot of things going. So I run a couple of Facebook groups. Unfortunately, they are both only for women. One is Divorce Recovery Over 60. Let me make sure I've got the right name. I'm going to pull up my Facebook just to make sure I'm calling it the right. Divorce Recovery for Women Over 60. And then I have a separate group that is kind of speaks to my heart and one of the things I love, which is reading, and that's Divorce Recovery Book Club. And in that group, we read a different book we were doing a month schedule, but I've kind of stretched it out because I felt like we were a little bit feeling rushed. So it's about every 6 weeks we read a different book that I hand select that I think will help with recovery. Many of the books are not specifically about divorce, but they are about like the topics we've been talking about today. And anyone is welcome to join that. It's a free group. We meet online on Zoom to discuss the book. And then I also do private coaching, and you can reach me. Anyone can contact me through email at Holly Holloway Coaching. It's all one word, at gmail.com. And then I occasionally do workshops, and I just my passion right now is running these 12-week groups where I take a small group of women and we really, really, really dive in. And that group is available to women no matter where you are in the process. We've had several women who actually were only separated and considering divorce, all the way to women who had been divorced for several years and just felt like they needed a little something to get them heading in the right direction. So I welcome women at any phase of the journey. And again, this is also only for women. But it's a wonderful place to just be seen and heard and understood. And for many of us, maybe for the first time, because it is so difficult to talk about what we're going through with most of the people in our lives.
And it's a very supportive group. I will say that, women uplift and support each other in that group, and you will feel like it is a safe space, and you will grow. I can't say enough about it. And Holly, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so.
I hope to come back, maybe.
Well, we'd love to have you
yes,
back.
Yes, absolutely. Why not?
We've only scratched the surface.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I
There's
hope
so much struggle.
I hope everyone has written down all of Holly's contact information. We've had a great discussion today, and I'd also like to mention for everyone out there to please join us on our next episode and make sure to subscribe to the Silver Divorce podcast. And we welcome any of your questions. And you may email us at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com or join our Facebook page at Silver Divorce Podcast.
Right. Thanks, Pat. And also, if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review and a rating. Those are very important to us as we grow this podcast. And also, if you are newly in the divorce process or you're considering divorce, we're here to help you navigate and tell you things your attorney might not tell you.
Right.
Until next time, remember, divorce is an event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Pat.
We'll see you next time.
Absolutely.